Hello, I'm Dango Rose. Welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast, where everybody's listening. The Mountaineer brings you the latest news of the Peak to Peak region, in print, online, through our podcast, social media, and special publications. Now, listen in to the latest news of the area with our local journalists.
Everything's got soul, ain't nothing that don't. Everything's got soul, ain't nothing that don't. Well, everything's got soul, ain't nothing that don't. Everything's got soul, ain't nothing that don't. The trees and the mountains and the sky, the water in the rivers flowing by.
The song that you are currently listening to is called Everything's Got Soul. It's written by Evan Cantor with a co-writing credit from David Barry from the debut album from Cantor's band, the CBDs, Two Sets, which you can find now at the cbds1.bandcamp.com. You can learn more about the group in general by heading to their website, thecbds.com, and be sure to see them perform live in their 100th gig at the Very Nice Brewing Company very soon. More details coming up later in the podcast.
You can hear the sound. Everything's got soul.
Hello there, everybody. My name is Jamie Lammers, and welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast. I'm finally catching up on episodes, and hopefully we'll be able to get back on a regular schedule for airing in the next couple of weeks. Today, I'm bringing you last week's Music of the Mountains once again. But before we get into today's interview, some preliminary announcements. If you're interested in subscribing to the Mountaineer today to get news from peak to peak, then be sure to head to our website at themtnear.com and click on the subscribe button in the top right corner of our homepage. From there, you'll get full access to our digital archive and scanned copies of the physical newspaper. And you can choose to send a physical subscription to your mailbox or to the mailbox of someone that you love. If you want to get advertising into the paper and or the podcast, then be sure to email our editor-in-chief, Barbara Hart, at info@themountaineer.com and or myself at media@themountaineer.com, and learn more about the options that are available by heading to the mtnear.com/advertise. We're also looking for new voices to join us for our current season, Season 5. So if you're interested in being involved in the podcast in any way, shape, or form, then email info@themountaineer.com and or media@themountaineer.com, and we'll get something sorted for you. And finally, some promotional announcements brought to you by the Mountaineer.
Looking for a unique advertising opportunity? The Mountaineer Podcast may be a perfect fit for you. Our podcast reaches local listeners at least 3 days each week. We can create your podcast commercial for you, or you can submit your own. Contact Amanda McDonald for additional information. Her email is adsales@themountaineer.com, and her cell is 720-960-2900. Have you checked out the Mountaineer YouTube lately? We are very excited to have a videographer intern this spring, as well as Clementine Miller, who's been working hard to record some of our local events and meetings to share with you. Go check it out on the Mountaineer YouTube. Have you seen our 2024 Peak to Peak Visitors Guide? We have just launched our 2025 Media Kit for the next guide. Go to our website and click on Advertise to see the full media kit there. Spring is springing, and we all know that means the flowers will be popping out all over the place, reminding us of beautiful art. That also means it's time to start thinking about the 2025 studio tour. Go to our website and click on special sections to view the 2024 guide and prepare yourself for this year's edition.
All right, let's get into today's incredibly special interview. We have 3 guests on board today. Do you all mind introducing yourselves real quick?
No problem. I'm Evan Cantor. I play the acoustic rhythm guitar for the CBDs, the blues harp, sing probably the lion's share of the lead vocals.
I'm Burt Rashbaum. I play keys, and on those keys I play piano, organ, trumpet, saxophone, and vibes. And I do the secondary leads on a lot of songs.
You sing lead on a number of them.
Yeah.
I'm Roland LaForge. I play lead electric guitar and occasional backup vocals.
This interview was originally conducted on April 30th, 2025, outside the train cars. Because we conducted this interview outside, background noise ended up being inevitable. It shouldn't overwhelm what our guests are saying, but just keep in mind that it's going to be prevalent throughout this interview. Well, guys, I'm incredibly excited to promote you three today because you're about to celebrate your 100th gig at the Very Nice Brewing Company in Nederland very soon.
Right, yeah. You know, a lot of bands, they might play 100 plus gigs in a year, but those are people who are making a living by being musicians, and we are not. We're doing it for the fun of it. So we're all retired guys having a blast playing rock music.
Yeah, we were probably want to be professional musicians at some point.
Right.
But decided we had to earn a living and wanted to have families and a normal family life.
Something resembling normality, right? Yeah.
I promoted the CBDs 3 years ago and interviewed Evan for that particular promotion. I also recently interviewed Burt for a National Poetry Month spotlight. This is the first time I've had Roland on as a guest, though, and it's the first time I've had all three of them together. So I want to hear from all of you. How'd you guys get started as a band?
Well, it's a long story, and we'll try to keep it short.
These two guys were in a band called Too Much Jones.
It started in about 05.
But it was earlier than that.
And I knew Burt at the university where we both worked. And at that time, I thought, man, that's really great. Burt's got this band. He plays with these old friends of his in this band. That sounds like so much fun. I've played in bands since I was a teenager. Played in nightclubs, played in frat houses. Like Roland says, the dream was like, oh, I was going to be a musician. And then you start pushing 30 and the lifestyle is not like manifesting, the money is not showing up. You're working construction by day and rehearsing at night, and finally got a job. So at one point, their bass player needed to take a break for some reason. He was a music teacher and he needed to take a break. So I started subbing as a bass player for their band.
We didn't do all that many gigs as a band, but there were 5 of us, and we were Too Much Jones because they were the two Jones brothers. And it was really their initial impetus that created this band.
Yeah, we were basically their backup band.
Well, but there were 5 of us, and we did a lot of 5-part harmony songs, a lot of a cappella. So we were really serious on the vocal end. But we did a lot of benefits for various causes here and there. So I don't know if we even did 15 gigs in the 6 or 7 years we were together. But we wanted to continue and sort of turn it into a band. When our bass player sort of decided he was done, and Evan took over, and we were supposed to have a rehearsal where we really were going to look forward and see what we could become and turn ourselves into. And one of the Jones never showed up. He was the lead singer. The 3 of us were waiting around, and Evan was prepared to play bass like we've been doing. And so we thought, well, let's play some music and see what could happen here.
I had brought along an acoustic guitar. We might have had an intimation that Craig wanted to do something different or didn't want to do the band stuff anymore. So I brought that guitar. And so, we said, well, we were playing around a little bit. It was kind of weird because I had never really learned bass lines for their songs. I just played along with whatever they were playing. So I picked up the guitar and I asked Burt, what was Craig playing on this song? And the song was Ride the Road. It's an Eric Clapton and J.J. Cale tune. And Burt says, well, he just started strumming away like crazy. I'm like, oh, you mean like this? And the next thing I know, he's playing the intro on the lead guitar, and he pops in with the keys, and it's like, hey, this sounds like a band.
We stop and look at each other and say, hey, this is going to work.
Right. So we, at that point, finally quantified that Craig, he didn't really want to be in a band at that point in time.
He actually moved to San Diego.
And he was moving to California. So we call him the godfather of the CBDs.
He shows up.
And sometimes he shows up at the gigs. Yeah. So at that point, we were like, wow, this sounds good. Let's keep doing this.
Going.
And we recruited percussion and bass.
We didn't want a drummer that had
Right.
a loud drum kit because that could prevent you from getting gigs in certain places where they don't want a loud
So
band.
it takes up a lot of space.
But we did want a percussion guy, which we didn't have in this other band. And luckily, Evan, you ran into Scott, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah, I knew Scott from some neighborhood musicians down in Table Mesa. And just like Craig, I don't know, somehow he convinced you to buy a keyboard and play.
Burt will talk more about how he was convinced to play the piano in public later in the episode.
Well, somehow Steve Ellis had convinced Scott Samaru to buy some congas and play.
kidding.
Because he's like at a neighborhood jam and Scott is going like this, on the, playing a ham bones or whatever, and he's like, oh, this guy's got rhythm, you should get some congas,
You can keep a beat.
So then I saw Steve performing with Alex, and Alex Volkash had a more ambitious percussion kit. And at that point, I'm like, well, if Steve is playing with Alex, then I wouldn't be stealing Scott if I asked him to play with us. So Scott played with us probably about 4 or 5 years, and then he moved to Santa Fe. At that point, I asked Alex if he would be our percussionist. And he showed up, and he had a snare and a hi-hat and some other things, and,
Somebody sat on.
right, a thing that he sat on.
And beat on.
It is very hard to find a drummer that doesn't play at maximum volume. And that was, your jazz guys. You'll see little jazz trios, and those guys, they do with the brushes, and they're very disciplined. And it was one band I played in. I asked the percussion guy, would you consider a less is more approach? No. I'm like, oh.
Well, okay then.
All right.
That's why I'm a drummer.
Yeah.
So you got the hard rock guys and you got the jazz guys, and we were kind of
Somewhere in between, right. So at that point, Alex played with us for another 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and he's a doctor, he's raising kids, and he decided he didn't have time.
Well, when Greg died, our bassist of 9 years, when he died, Alex didn't want to keep doing the percussion. He wanted to do something else. And that's when the three of us decided, well, maybe we can just be a trio.
Yeah.
And once again, we had to kind of reinvent ourselves, because playing a gig with 3 of us with no bass player and no percussion guy, we have to sort of figure out our parts in a way that those people aren't missed.
Mm-hmm.
And we managed to do it by the way
Yeah, we had
we
to cover-
arrange our songs.
You had to cover the lower end.
Right.
I'm usually playing leads way up on the neck, so I had to play more bass parts down below in certain places, and Burt did too.
And I play piano in a percussive way. I'm influenced by a band, like Supertramp, where that was the way they played their piano. I mean, they call those little things in the piano hammers.
You're right.
So I could get into that,
But, having the electric keyboard, he can play the flute part on the song Can't You See? He can play the saxophone break on Baker Street. He can get a lot of different sounds. And so that gives the three of us a real variety in terms of ear fatigue. You're not hearing the same combination of sounds song after song after song. You can be surprised by what you hear.
Yeah, where's that coming from? I know they had a sax player.
Exactly. I'll see faces turn like, what?
Yo, where's the
And they're
horn?
looking.
Where's the horn?
And
Yeah.
it's like, hi, it's me over here on the keyboard.
Yeah.
I've got a pedal board, so I can have some effects, some distortion, and some echo, some delay, some octaving things in certain places too. That all comes in once in a while. So,
Roland also plays a great slide guitar.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
And that's got a very distinctive sound in a lot of songs that just make the song,
So it gives us a lot of opportunities to really spread out and try different sounds and kind of get outside of our lanes.
But then we've tried things that I don't think any of the three of us would have ever imagined that we could pull off.
Let's do Bex Bolero.
Yeah. Burt
Must
says,
be
let's try Bex Bolero.
I
We're
can't
like,
do that. I go home and play along with it and say, I can do this. It's not that hard.
right. And you could even watch a YouTube of Jeff Beck doing it. You can almost see how he does it. It's like, oh, okay,
Yeah,
fine.
that's it. Okay,
Excellent.
he's playing up
Cool.
here on this fret.
Right. And it's a great song. People who recognize it are surprised to hear it because what they're mostly seeing is me up front with an acoustic guitar. They're thinking, oh, Crosby, Stills, and Nash or something, and it's not quite like that.
Yeah, we try to do the songs. They aren't like the top 40 songs that made the radio, but they're more interesting songs by those same artists. And some people get them, and some people say, what's that? And
Yeah.
people have next table, oh yeah, that's off of the David Bowie album.
Right.
You didn't hear it on the radio.
You're right.
but they're doing it.
And it sounds like you guys have played music as a hobby or as part of your lives for, well, your entire lives. So I'm curious, how did you all get started in music in the first place, and what's your journey been like as individuals?
Well, we can talk about our backgrounds a little bit. Yeah.
Well, you know Burt as a poet and a writer. You probably don't know me as a visual artist. So I've done visual art.
Yeah, he does amazing
all his time. I mean, I was doing black and white scratchboard stuff for years and getting it published in Wild Earth magazine. So in the conservation community, people know who I am because they saw my artwork in Wild Earth magazine for like 10 years in the 90s.
And you did some covers.
Yeah, I had a couple of covers for that. But I got tired of doing the black and white, and so I took up oil painting about 10 years ago. And I'm going to be in a gallery down in Morrison. I'm going to have some events down here in Bouldertown soon. So I'm doing all right with the visual art, but it's no more or less important to me than music.
I mean, I'm one of these people that took piano lessons as a kid for like 6 years, but hated every minute of it. So when I finally was old enough and had the guts to finally quit, I didn't touch a piano for years. And when I finally got a piano, I would only play when nobody was around. My wife even had to be out of the house. And I would pull out music books, or I would improvise, or write some original music. But even with the visual arts, I was a word man. And I was a poet and wrote short stories for years. And it was Craig from Too Much Jones who had a music night one night, and he knew I had a piano, and he said, I'll rent you the piano. And he said, we'll have chord sheets for every song, so you won't have to guess anything, and nobody will be there but the few people playing instruments. So I thought, okay, Craig, you rent the piano, I'll show up if no one's going to be there. And when I walked in, there were like 20 people there. There was a full buffet of food, and I said, what is this? And he said, if I would have told you what we're really going to do, you wouldn't have come, you know? So it's like, all right, now that I'm here, let's see if I can, you know. And I took off my shyness and played, and I realized this is fun, you know?
Yeah.
Fun to play with other people. And it became more and more a part of my life, and now I feel like it's like oxygen for me. I feel like there have been times in my life where playing music has almost saved me from the depths of the darkest places. And I'm still doing my writing and getting published, but the music is right up there. It's as important, an outlet for me to find help.
Okay, well, I grew up in a musical household. There was music playing all the time, but it was all classical music or Broadway show tunes. And so early on, I started taking music lessons. I played the tuba for 3 or 4 years, took lessons from that, and then got tired of that and picked up the double bass. In my 4 years, my high school years, I took lessons on double bass and played in all sorts of different groups. It was great. With bass, you play all different genres. I played in the symphony orchestra, I played in a jazz band, I played in a jazz trio, all sorts of different genres. And then I went off to college and brought the guitar with me, because that's all I had. And just kept plunking along on the guitar, and finally got to the point where I could buy an electric guitar, which is what I always wanted. And then just kept playing on that. I was raising kids, had a career, and the kids got old, and that time on my own is when I met up with these guys. We had the Too Much Jones, which just started as a party, and we all looked at each other and said, hey, this is good, let's keep it going.
Yeah, those Jones brothers, there's actually 3 of them, and they all grew up singing harmony, like the Everly Brothers or something, you know, all together. So yeah, Craig and Mark were their frontmen.
I'd say all in all, we were deeply affected by the British invasion in the 60s and 70s. And before that, Motown, folk music, Dylan, Peter, Paul, and Mary. So we were all very deeply affected by that era. And that's the kind of music I think we still like to play, and our originals.
I remember at 10 years old, my parents let us have the soundtrack record to the Broadway show Hair. It was like, wow, that was a real different take on all of the Broadway show albums at the house, you know?
So music really has been a part of all of your lives for all of this time.
Serious hobby.
So as writing and performing as the CBDs, how did that process start, and how has it evolved over the years?
Oh, yeah.
Well, the first time I had a chance to collaborate with Evan, we used to work in the same building years and years ago at CU. He comes over to me and he says, Burt, I got this CD here and it's full of some original music, but I can't seem to find lyrics for any of these songs. See if you can give this a listen, you know? So I thought, sure, I'll see what I could do. And I would listen and listen and listen, and I would wait for sort of like the muse to to come through with something. And I came up with some lyrics for some of these songs, and that was the last I heard of these songs until years later when we were a band, and I found out that there was at least one that your other band almost did.
Right.
And then you brought some of these to the CBDs.
Yeah, at that time I was forming a band that eventually became called Moto Sapien, and we were playing Denver nightclubs. We played Trilogy Lounge down here in Boulder. We were kind of like a post-punk rock band, and I had recorded all these riffs and stuff because I was looking to write songs because we wanted to be an original band. So I was the only one in the group that was writing songs, and I had given Burt that disc. So those things turned into little almost songs. It never really quite made it onto Moto Sapien's playlist. We only lasted a year before it imploded like so many bands do. And then it was like, okay, fine. So then years later, I discovered this sheet music on my computer desktop. Oh, hey, this is a song that Burt and I sort of wrote 15 years ago, And we're practicing that song now for the 100th gig. So we like coming full circle in a sense, But then, I had made a whole album of instrumental songs, and I gave it to you, and you loaded it into your iTunes. And you tell this story better than I do.
So, and this has happened a couple times. So after the King Soopers massacre, that was on a Monday. And on Wednesdays, I have this sort of meditative day where I clean my fish tank, I put on music, and I just sort of have a very nice day to myself. And so I was very depressed that day because by the time they announced the names of the people who were massacred, in I think 3 cases, they were friends of friends. So I didn't know anyone directly, but I started thinking of these families that were in mourning over this horrible tragedy. And I was thinking to myself, is there something I could say to these families that might in some way help them deal with their grief? And I realized there really isn't. There really isn't. But as I was working on my tank, it occurred to me that I couldn't say something to these families, but the sun could maybe say something to these families. So I got into poet mode and I started writing a poem as if the sun was talking to these families. And all of a sudden I realized, I'm actually writing a poem here. So I wrote a couple of lines and I maybe another verse, and then a piece of music came on that I didn't know what it was. It was just instrumental, but it somehow got me to sit down, and while that music played, I just wrote and finished this poem. So I figured, who am I listening to? So I go over to my iTunes, and it's Evan, and it was from that disc. So it's like, I have to send Evan an email and tell him what just happened. So I send him an email and I say, by the way, I was listening to this music. It had a title, so I sent him the title. I said, here's the poem, and that's what happened today. So like, I don't know, an hour, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours later, I get an email from Evan, and he said, Burt, that music, which I had to look for in my files, fits so almost perfectly with your poem that I'm attaching the chord sheet and the demo. And it's like the demo, and it became a song. It's on that CD, and it's called I'm Still There. And we've had similar sorts of experiences where I've sent Evan some lyrics or words and said, is this a song? And then like the next day he goes, well, here's the demo. And so that's how we've written a few songs.
Yeah.
And that's really exciting because then I have to print the sheet and I sit and I play that, 2 days ago this didn't exist and now we have a song. It's really very exciting.
This speaks to a kind of universal experience amongst musicians. So, if you read autobiographies and biographies, Jerry Garcia and Robert Hunter are sitting in the room and they look at each other. Oh my God, we just wrote a real song, didn't we? And it's all across the board. We just are experiencing it at our level. We don't have the 100 million fans,
So these guys are the songwriters. They come up with the lyrics. I'm the music guy. I was terrible at English. I'm not a word guy, but I try to fit in some rhythm parts and some lead parts that kind of mesh with what they've done.
He has written some beautiful guitar parts to songs that I wrote, and I don't even want to play those songs by myself anymore because I want to hear the beautiful parts that Roland wrote.
Like I said to Evan a couple times, I can't wait to see what Roland does with this. And that's when the song really is complete.
So these are the Jagger and Richards, and I'm the Mick Taylor.
Yeah, there you go.
The guy who comes up with lead parts, or the guy in Queen. What's his name?
Brian May.
Brian May. I'm the guy that does that stuff.
Yeah, and you are like Brian May in a lot of ways because he's an astrophysicist,
That's right.
dude. You're a volcanologist.
Geophysics was my career.
He's not a Vulcan. Okay.
So it's a different brain space.
Yeah.
And it meshes really well. I think every good successful band has to have that mix.
Yeah.
The word guys, the lyrics guys, and then a guy that does some musical things that really stand out.
I mean, it enhances any group to have people who serve multiple functions. And I think all three of us do that. So if you hear us across the parking lot from the Very Nice Brewing Company, you'll very likely think there's a 4 or 5 piece band in there playing, because there's so much. I mean, we make more sound than most trios, I think. Well, maybe not as much sound as
Cream.
Led Zeppelin or Cream, but a lot of sound is coming out of us.
And what it is, it's a chemistry that has really taken us years to hone. But the fun part is, if we come to a rehearsal with a new song, whether it's original or a deep cut from some famous band, we work on it until in our playing of the song, we start to figure out what we each need to do in that song. And because we've had this decades-long friendship, it's this chemistry that all of a sudden the song arises and we realize we've got it.
So it's a constant adjustment, though.
Absolutely.
Every time we play it, it sounds a little different.
Right, that's right.
Figured out, well, if I do a little thing here, that kind of fills in a gap.
Right.
But most bands don't last that long.
Right. Well, that's why it's so freaking amazing that we're having a 100th gig. At one point, we had a 50th gig, and we were like, all three of us were like, well, I never played in a band that had played 50 gigs before.
It was a big deal. The 50th was, we did it
20
here in
gigs,
town.
so we had a big argument. It was all
right. I mean, the longest I was ever in any other band was 3 years, and we played maybe 30 gigs over that time. So the 50th was a big deal. Here we are now, 12 plus years later, the 100th. It's like, wow. Well, I don't know about the 1000th, but the 100th is a big deal. Like what you were talking about, the adjustments, how every time we play a song, each of us is thinking, oh, there's something else I can do to enhance this particular thing. We've been playing While My Guitar Gently Weeps. Well, I realized last week, without a bass player with us, I'm playing an F major 7th chord with a low E, but it's supposed to be an F. So what if I just play an F in that place? It's like, oh, duh. I got the bass covered now, I learned that. But it's also by design, kind of like the Grateful Dead. It's by design. If there's a hippie chick dancing wild and out in front of us, we're like, yeah, take another solo, take another lead. Hey, Burt, give us some more, keep going. Don't stop, keep going. The good vibes are rolling, so you want to go with them.
We've been talking about a CD throughout the course of this interview. Before the interview started, Evan gave me a copy of the CBDs debut album, 2 Sets. I wanted to ask, how did this album come to be?
Yeah, between the three of us, we made lists. Like, what songs do you want to play? Go into the studio, which song? And we came up with 19 of these songs. And we figured, well, we'll probably have 11 or 12 really good versions. And we practiced them up. We went into the studio and we banged them out, one after the other. Yeah, a couple of first takes, a couple of second or third takes, but we just played through the whole day. And when we listened to all of what we played, there wasn't a single outtake in the bunch.
It was a shock to all of us, including the producer, because he's like, nobody comes up with 19 songs in one day and every single one of them is a keeper.
Right.
It's like, now what do we do?
So we've been playing these songs for years.
We had been, yes. They were road tested.
That's right.
Yeah, we're well-oiled, as they say.
That's right.
We're a well-oiled machine on these songs.
Right. Now, one of the songs that we recorded was written by Greg Stopp, was our bass player who had died earlier that same year that we went into the studio. And he used to sing, he was the one who used to sing that song.
Yeah, the huge loss.
It was, and he was a tremendous bass player.
And a soul singer.
Great soul singer.
He sounded just like Wilson Pickett or Otis Redding, his voice. So we did that in a sense. We recorded that song as a tribute to him.
We have to give hats off to the producer.
Oh, yeah.
Paul. I mean, there were some minor glitches, just a note here and there, and with the miracle of digital audio processing, go in and fix those things.
Yeah. I mean, there was very few, in a sense, mistakes that were found, but there were little hiccups here and there.
But we never had to record new parts.
No, it was like placement, placement of a note. I think I recorded a couple of extra harmony vocals for 2 songs, just to give it more oomph, and Paul put the drums on everything.
As Evan said, he went in there and did the bass parts, and they're really spot on.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I spent a week, every day of the week before I went into Paul's studio, I spent like an hour and a half or 2 hours guitars playing along with the recordings with the bass. So I learned all the bass lines, went in there and boom, one day banged those out at the studio. So, and that was a tremendous experience. I mean, he'd ask me, well, was there any hiccups in that one? You know, I'm like, well, maybe, at the end of the third verse, we go back, oh yeah. He'd say, okay, I'll punch you in right here, punch you out right there. Just play along again. Boom, 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 boom. 5 notes. Okay, it's done. All right, everything's fixed. No hiccups. Everything sounds. I'd never been in the studio where I had that kind of engineer doing this stuff. I mean, I come from a tradition where there was a guy in a shack with a 4-track reel-to-reel recorder who was like so up. One band that I dropped out of college to play in, we played one gig in a concert hall. It was a progressive rock band like King Crimson or Yes. He had his 4-track there to record the show. He put in a used reel-to-reel tape that had been spliced backwards. Like, this is like having the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers as your engineers. Yeah.
And so these 19 songs, the way we worked on them was in alphabetical order, just to make it easy. So we went from A to Z, and we would work on them and play them, and we recorded them in the same order, alphabetical. Once we decided to keep all 19 songs, and as Paul would work on them, he would send us, here's a new version of this, or one of you said you needed more piano in this, or whatever. I would still listen to them at home in the same order. But when it became serious that we were going to keep all 19, I write the set lists for the band in just about every case. So I thought, well, when we play a gig, normally we do 2 sets.
I had to make an edit here because the wind was so overwhelming for a moment with what Burt said, but he emphasized that the 2 sets that the CBDs perform usually have around 20 songs.
Right.
So let me figure out what the order of the 2 sets of a gig would be, no longer in alphabetical order. And it took me a while, but once I figured it out and then played it in that new order, I realized this is an album. It really is an album. And it's 2 sets, it's 2 sides, it's 2 CDs, and that's how that sort of happened.
So between the CDs you're listening to, you can get up and have a beer or get something to eat, sit down and listen to the seconds.
So we've already talked about the recording of the song written by bassist Greg Staub and recorded in memory of him. But there's another writing credit on the album that I wanted to talk about real quick. Evan, on the CD, it says that Everything's Got Soul was co-written by you and David Barry.
Oh, Dave Barry was the drummer in the band Moto Sapien that I played in. I sometimes have a hard time remembering in what order these bands I played in, but that was the time when I gave the disc to Burt with the, hey, I recorded a bunch of these riffs, does any of this spark a lyric? And David Barry and I, we would jam with this guy, Ed Fowler, who was my lead guitarist from a band called Walls of Genius in the 80s. So the 3 of us, it was really to feature Ed, because Ed was a kind of idiot savant with the electric guitar. He was like genius. I mean, David and I, with me playing bass, David playing drums, we would get a groove going, and Ed would basically be unleashed. Just turn him on, turn the switch, And David and I are like, man, we gotta play gigs, man. This is awesome. Ed's like, I don't want to play gigs. Ed, if we play some gigs, you will be a guitar god in this city, I don't want to play any gigs. So finally, David and I decided that we would have to find another guitarist and another bassist. I would play the electric guitar, and we would form a band, and we would play gigs. So one of those jam sessions, the break in Everything's Got Soul was a thing that I mostly came up with, but I was working with David when it happened. So I just wanted to give him some credit for being there, for being a part of that. And that break, it's kind of amazing how it's sort of like a Paul McCartney style construction where a whole different song starts up in the middle, but is perfectly harmonically connected to the other part.
So it sounds like a big part of what you all love about performing together is the chemistry that you all share as a group.
It doesn't come immediately either. I remember the first gig we did as Too Much Jones was right here at the Kathmandu. And after the first set, we'd get together and say, oh my God, I messed up that part, and you messed up that part, and I messed up that part, and somebody's friends in the audience see us, you guys sounded great. It takes a long time for that to gel. It doesn't happen overnight.
It makes me think one of the lessons about playing fretless bass, and you will know this from playing the double bass upright, is that it doesn't necessarily matter if you hit a wrong note, as long as you hit something at the right spot. So you can like play through it. Now on a recording, recordings are different than playing live. You may want to correct that wrong note on a recording, but playing live, I'm not sure. I mean, even the Grateful Dead on Europe 72,
you hear wrong notes.
Well, they did a whole bunch of overdubbing of things to fix it up, make it sound just spot on. Who knows if it really was all that spot on at the time.
And what Gary, our bass player in Too Much Jones, said was, the only one that hears our mistakes is us.
Yeah.
So I will make mistakes. These guys won't hear that. He might make mistakes. I don't hear that.
Now these guys would know that like if they got me stoned, I might like start a song completely differently than the way we practiced it. So I was like, no, let's not do that,
Now, in a lot of ways, this question comes full circle for me as well. Two Sets is dedicated to both Greg and Sharon Ferguson. Sharon was Burt's wife and a longtime member of the Nederland community. Both of these individuals were incredibly important to the CBDs as a band, and they were tributed in a show in Kathmandu, which is the show that I promoted the last time I interviewed Evan for the CBDs. Realizing that this show was incredibly different from the shows that I normally promoted, I came up with a question in the moment. What do you hope people will take away from this show? And I realized it was such a poignant question that I've since used it in pretty much every interview I've conducted since. In the past, I didn't usually come back to re-promote certain groups, but in the case of the CBDs, a lot of the stuff we've been talking about throughout the course of this interview didn't happen when I last promoted them. So I want to ask once again, is there anything now that you hope people will take away from the CBDs when they listen to your album or see you perform?
Well, I think we've always hoped that people just have a lot of fun hearing the tunes because we have so much fun playing, and I believe that we communicate that enjoyment to the audience. Any musical performance involves the audience to a large extent. I mean, the energy of the audience, it's a kind of a circular thing. You give it to them, they give it back to you. That's not really anything new. I think for me, if there was something new that I'd like people to take away, it's that, oh yeah, my friends really play in a band and they sound good. Wow. And they keep doing it. Wow.
Well, for me, as we all know, there have been a lot of changes in the music industry in the last 10, 20 years, even the last 5 years. And a lot of the music you hear now on the main street is made by one guy sitting at a computer making electronic sounds. And there's something kind of missing there. And I've always believed there's always a market for live music. People like to hear live music. No matter how homogenized, how commercial music gets, people will always want to sit in a place and listen to musicians playing music. I think that's our main pull. And also, we offer a high level of musicianship. In all modesty, we've been around a long time. We've played in different bands. We have a lot of experience. And we're playing originals. And we're also playing what you would call deep cuts out of albums, groups that played a long time ago. But that was a special era, and we're still kind of mining that repertoire. So I think that's what we have to offer.
Yeah, I think we can mine that repertoire probably till our dying day. I mean, there's so much musical history out there.
I would add that what I would want to happen, which happens at almost every gig anyway, there's an infectiousness that happens because of our excitement, the level we play at. As Evan said, it's almost like a loop where the audience feeds off us and then we feed off that energy, goes back and forth. So I really like when people, on some level that they might not even consciously think of, are aware of the healing properties of music and the way that it just makes you feel good.
Yeah, there's no substitute.
There's no substitute because it's, again, like Roland was saying about the live music and that experience. And people don't want to leave because of how they feel. And we've had a lot of experiences over a lot of years of gigs where people sit down, don't know who we are, and by the last song, they're still sitting there. And then they have to come over and just say, thank you so much. I didn't expect this, So that level of surprise, I'm hoping for the folks who don't know us, they get bit by the bug with the CBDs.
And we also hope to inspire the younger folks to, instead of staring at your screen and looking at TikTok, pick up a musical instrument, learn how to play it, get in a band, because it's so much fun. It really is. It's work. It doesn't come immediately, but you only get better the more you play.
Right. It's the kind of work you want to do as opposed to like dragging yourself off to the office,
Yeah.
Once again, there was a small portion where the wind overwhelmed Roland speaking for a second, but he added on to what Evan just said by saying, music is the kind of job that you can start and stop whenever you want.
It always sounds good to your ear.
There's an incredible amount of satisfaction in working through the material and realizing that you can make it sound good. You can adjust it to what you have to offer.
Yeah.
We started playing a song, John Barleycorn, recently. We were like, well, how are we going to make this work for us if we want to do this? Roland, he's our lead guitar player. He starts playing the bass. Right.
Yeah, the bass on the electric, but making it sound like a bass.
And so next thing we know, it's like, oh yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, we got a folk song.
And then I'd been playing the song for some years just on the acoustic guitar. So I started chording the breaks differently, which meant that I was doubling his bass line in the break. And we're like, wow, that kind of supercharged it. He's like, okay, step by step, we figure this stuff out, we work it up. And next thing you know, it's our arrangement, it's our version.
And I listened to that actual song by Traffic, and there's a main component that's a flute. So I know I have a flute sound on the keyboard, but I'm listening to it going, I can't play that, what he's playing. But it's like, you know what? I think I'll be able to figure out my part using that sound, and it just fit right in. And
yeah, we're always pushing each other. They come up with songs that, I can't do that.
Right.
That's way too complex. You need an orchestra for that.
You're right.
And we make it work.
But you're a Roland, of course you can do
Yeah.
that.
Oh, so when we were figuring out
It's a
Baker
talent.
Street, there's different
that's an
parts,
orchestral piece.
had to do the same thing. Well, first it was the saxophone,
with three people.
That's right.
Then I started at one point playing the harmonica to sort of cover an organ part because he's playing a saxophone. He can't play the organ and the saxophone at the same time. All this stuff gets worked out.
So we kind of push each other to do more challenging parts and pieces.
As we start to wrap up this interview, Evan has some closing thoughts on the kind of music that the CBDs focus on.
Once upon a time, I played in a band called the Folkgrass Blues Band in Charlottesville in 1978 and 79, and we would play all of these Hank Williams songs and stuff. But we never worried about intros and breaks. We were just playing straight through the chords, and that's okay as far as what it is. But here, 50 years later, we're like, oh no, we want to play the breaks. We want to play the intros.
Yeah, we want to get a nice intro.
We want
to get a nice ending.
Right. And we want to be tight, and we want to know what we're doing.
Right. We don't want too many train wrecks.
Oh, there's one or two songs like a train wreck is the appropriate ending, but that's,
but I think those days are behind us.
Yeah, right.
And is there anything else in general that you all want to add before we sign off?
It's going to be fun. Come out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's about all we
Guarantee.
can say.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, and we will reprise the show on August 22nd up at the Gilpin Very Nice Brewing Company. So if you miss us for the 100, you can catch us for the 101st.
If you're on your sorrows about losing your money, you can come hear some music and we'll make you feel better.
A splendid time is guaranteed for all.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you so much to the whole current trio of Evan, Burt, and Roland for coming on board and talking about your group, the CBDs. They'll be performing their 100th gig at the Very Nice Brewing Company location in Nederland, located at 20 East Lakeview Drive, number 112 in the Caribou Village Shopping Center. They'll be performing there on Sunday, May 25th, 2025, starting at 4 p.m. For more information about the group and to purchase 2 sets, be sure to head to their website at thecbds.com. And if you're curious about Evan Cantor's artistic endeavors in general, you can visit his website, evancantor.com. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to this very special Music of the Mountains episode of the Mountaineer Podcast. I will have this week's Music of the Mountains episode out very soon, and then I should finally be caught up on our podcast schedule, and we can hopefully cement a more consistent podcast schedule in the next couple of weeks. In the meantime, if you want to share this episode or others around with whoever you see fit, then be sure to head to the mtnear.com and scroll near to the bottom, or head to our podcast's main hub at the mtnearpodcast.buzzsprout.com to see a full archive of all of our episodes. If you're interested in being involved in the paper and or the podcast in any way, shape, or form, then be sure to email info@themountaineer.com and or media@themountaineer.com, and we'll get something sorted for you. And finally, be sure to check out our individual episode descriptions of our podcasts for all of our most important links: our main website, our Facebook, our YouTube, our Instagram, and much more. You can even send us a text and give us general or specific feedback about the paper and or the podcast. We'd love to hear from you. I'll see you guys next time for another Music of the Mountains segment. Have a great rest of your day!
Cheeky monkey, dance down the street like a dust devil drawn by the hand of Picasso. Cheeky monkey, mermaid fairy dream, streaming sky blue rainbow. Cheeky monkey.
The song that you are currently listening to is called Cheeky Monkey. It's written by Evan Cantor, and it's the opening track on the debut album from his band, the CBDs, Two Sets, which you can purchase now by heading to thecbds1.bandcamp.com. For more information about the CBDs, be sure to head to their website at thecbds.com. And be sure to see the group live for their 100th gig at the Very Nice Brewing Company location in Nederland, located at 20 East Lakeview Drive, number 112 in the Caribou Village Shopping Center on Sunday, May 25th, starting at 4 p.m.
And that's it for our show. Subscribe online to get more access to more news, weekly updates to our community calendar, and a link to our YouTube channel by visiting themountaineer.com. Be sure to use the coupon code PODCAST when subscribing for a 10% discount, only available to our listeners. If you are in the local Peak to Peak area, be sure to pick up a print edition of The Mountaineer at a local business. I'm Dango Rose. Thank you for listening.